Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara and today we're going to be going over romantic obsession. So I'm very excited to get into this video. As usual, these are just my own observations, opinions, things that I have noticed through time. So you guys can take what resonates, leave behind what does not. Also, another disclaimer in this video is that I am not a psychologist by any means. So once again, you guys can take what resonates and leave behind what does not. So what is romantic obsession? So you guys are going to notice this in terms of astrology or like the astrological placements within your own natal charts. People who are prone to this are going to be any sort of Venus Neptunian aspects. If you have Venus in Pisces, if you have Venus in the 12th house, if you have Pisces in the 7th house, Pisces in the 5th house, Neptune in the 7th, Neptune in the 5th house. Now, I will also say that potentially Scorpio people will have this tendency as well. So maybe like a Scorpio Venus, maybe Pluto in the 7th house, maybe Pluto in the 5th house, maybe your descendant, which is your 7th house in Scorpio as well. 12th house people could also have the tendency for romantic obsession as well. It could be a combination of these things. Or maybe you don't have any of these placements, maybe something that's taking place within synastry between your chart and somebody else's chart. Well, in that case, maybe it's going to be pulling you toward romantic obsession. But regardless of the natal chart, this is a thing that takes place within the collective. And what's interesting also is that I've noticed that this theme has blown up in the last few years, ever since we've had 2020 and everything that transpired during that period of time. A lot more like romantic obsession has been taking place within the collective. You'll see this when people talk about things like soulmates or twin flames. There's always like a new term or label for it, which is like this idealized union with another person. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I am not a psychologist, but one of my arguments in this video is going to be that, or questions rather, is going to be, is romantic obsession connected to trauma? Like, is this a trauma response? That's something that we would have to sit down and explore, or if this is something that takes place within yourself, you're going to have to explore that within yourself and look to see, is this something that is taking place? Because it's like a lot of the time, especially if you have any of these placements taking place in your chart that I mentioned, what has to take place for these people is they are looking for some sort of divine union. They're looking for love is really what that is ultimately at the end of the day. But if we were to break this down further, if you're looking for love within another person, what are you really looking for ultimately at the end of the day? Is it the person that you're looking for, or is it just love that you're looking for? Are you trying to achieve just this feeling, this vibration, this energy, this emotion within? Because it's really interesting to see the way society has been created thus far in terms of unions and having to be in a union with another person, or that's like kind of like the societal standard and just like the expectation. But it's like, is it realistic to be expecting another person to fulfill, first of all of your needs? That's a huge question here, because it's like, is it possible even for one person to fulfill all of your needs? I don't necessarily think so. Again, that's just my own opinion, but it's like, it's interesting to see because people who have these placements, and I've actually recently made a video as well where I spoke on not falling for people's potential. So when you fall for someone's potential, you're falling for the idealized version of them, someone that you have tapped into energetically, or maybe you have even created this idea in your mind, this world, the two of you. And it's like, if you're going into your crown chakra, because this is kind of what's happening metaphysically, a lot of my videos are also rooted from like a metaphysical perspective as well. What happens metaphysically is like you tap into someone's higher self, you tap into the potential of something, but it's like when you're in your crown chakra, when you're going off into the ethers, you're envisioning, you're imagining, you're daydreaming, you're going into those higher vibrations. And it's not to say that that's not real. I think that's kind of like a misconception with like Neptunian energy, for example. It's not to say that it's not real. It's just something that's not grounded into this physical reality yet. So a lot of the time there tends to be this like lag period between what we tap into in the higher planes and what's actually taking place down here in this physical reality. So in that video, I will link it in the description box below. I kind of spoke on the whole concept of tapping into someone's potential, their higher self, but maybe their 3D self, their physical self, like whatever is playing out in this physical reality hasn't merged with their higher self yet. Maybe it's this. Okay, it could be this as well. So it's like, in a way, then you're holding this person to such a high standard, this huge ideal, that like anything that they do in the physical reality might not match up to basically what's taking place in those higher realms, and then you end up getting disappointed. So this is gonna lead me into the whole next aspect of this, because you will see this in a lot of like artists, for example. They might have a lot of these placements taking place within their natal charts as well, where it's like they kind of like ended up in a lot of these like romantic situations, or like they wrote about love, or they wrote about heartbreak. And that's not to discredit that, but it's like there comes a point where it becomes a pattern. I hope that makes sense, where it's like it becomes an obsession, or like this idealization, or like you're constantly seeking this feeling. I feel like individuals who do maybe go through this like romantic obsession, some people might even call it limerence. So if you're going through this, you're seeing kind of like this ideal version of someone, but it's like in the physical reality, humans are humans, visions at the end of the day. And like sometimes you might have this huge discrepancy. Like you'll see this a lot of the time with people who end up in like very maybe dark situations. And a lot of the time this will happen, let's say to like 12th house people. These people do see like this idealized version within a person, but it's like who they are in the physical might not necessarily be aligning to who they are in your mind, for example, or who you are tapping into, for example. This is something that takes place and then you fall for the potential and then you end up disappointed. And this might be a pattern, let's say throughout your relationships. Sometimes these people might be dating someone and they might be unhappy with their partner, or they might not like feel like they're fully invested into the relationship, because once again there could be this feeling that there's somebody else out there, or there's this like idealized love, or this like idealized version. And I think something that a lot of these people are learning on this earth plane is that like perfect doesn't exist, and like that these idealized versions don't exist. I think this back to the whole trauma concept. So I feel like a lot of the time these individuals who maybe do have romantic obsession or like are looking for an idealized partner, basically what takes place is like maybe there was heavy trauma that took place in the earlier part of their life. Maybe they didn't have that love that they were seeking when they were children. Maybe there was just like a lot of tumultuous energy that took place within the home, or maybe they didn't have a home, or maybe they were orphans. There could be a lot of different scenarios that play out. And I feel like a lot of the time, this is just my own observation once again from just existing on this earth plane, I feel like what happens, especially up until this point, is like that love I do feel like that people are seeking maybe in a romantic partner is actually the unconditional love that maybe they didn't receive from the mother. So a lot of this could be connected to the mother wound as well. So that's one of my theories. It's connected to the mother wound. And it's like when you have this mother wound taking place, you are then prone to codependency, for example, because then you think you found it in this person and you finally found that feeling. You might stay longer with that person even if it's not aligning, or you might not see them clearly. Like it could be so many things that take place. So it could be connected to codependency. That's one other thing. Now another thing that I have been recently reflecting on and just like thinking about, and it's going to be a little bit more esoteric or just like metaphysical, is like I feel like that this love that people are seeking within another person is actually the love within the divine. It's just like love overall as a feeling that they're seeking. It could be just like their connection to source, their connection to the creator, the divine, God, whatever term you guys want to use. I really do feel like that's what it is, because I do feel like God is love. And I do feel like through all of these situations and circumstances, especially 12 house people, but any of these other placements do have these tendencies as well. It's like through these other experiences, you're looking for that within another person to be reflected within you. Now, when I talk about God and source and the creator, I'm not talking about it in like a religious sense at all, because like I feel like religion up until this point has just been like viewed and just like distorted, and it's been viewed in like a very shadow masculine lens. Like it hasn't really been viewed for like the spiritual roots. And not just that, I just think the consciousness of the collective has not been able to view it for what it actually originally was, like the spiritual roots of it all, or just like any sort of theology text, or just like any spiritual text overall. Like you have to be, I think, at a level of understanding to actually maybe understand what they were saying. These days, it's very much viewed in like a 3D lens. It's like this person has to act like that, this person has to act like this. You know what I mean? It's like very physical. The interpretation, like material, I guess is the term that I'm looking for. So I do feel like with that being said, that this is what people are ultimately looking for. They're looking for love, but they're actually looking for this union or connection to source, to God, to the creator, to the divine, to something bigger, to something larger than life. And I do feel like maybe they see it within another person. Maybe that person has achieved that themselves, for example, or maybe like there's something within that person that like they have this connection. Maybe they're operating a little bit more out of their heart space. But I think it's important to understand that like every person can achieve this within themselves. Now, with that being said, we do still need relationships, and I do think that relationships activate this within us. And I do believe that there's certain types of relationships where like they mirror certain things back to you, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be romantic. Like it can be in your partnerships as well, like your friendships. It can be in business partnerships. Like it can be in any type of relationship where you do have this like mirroring effect, where it's like the person is maybe showing you your shadows and so on and so forth. But I do feel like now as a collective, as we move through the higher frequencies and vibrations, people are going to be more in tune with themselves. They're going to be more authentic to themselves. That's just like the nature of like the Pluto and Aquarius energy, or even just like the age of Aquarius overall. So as we move through these higher vibrations, eventually people are going to be finding these energies within themselves. Is really what that is. And then when you kind of get to this frequency on your own, then you'll end up in these healthy dynamics, healthy situations. I do feel like eventually as a collective, we are going to get to that point where it's like there isn't going to really be any expectations within relationships in this way. Like I understand now it's gonna be a whole conversation of its own, where it's like, you know, you get into a dynamic and there are maybe certain expectations, but a lot of those things have been societal constructs. I hope that makes sense. Maybe I'm taking you guys too much into the crown, but a lot of things, like if you look at relationships, it's like when people get disappointed in relationships, it's because there is an expectation that's placed upon upon the dynamic. And it's like up until this point, especially when we look at certain unions, it's been like for financial reasons, for example, especially if it's something that's longer term or like more serious, or it's been like maybe you're looking for certain needs to be met within this person. But it's like, is it realistic to have all of your needs met in one person? And I think that's where the romantic obsession comes from. I think it comes from trying to put everything onto one person. And it's like, because there's this pedestal, whether within the person that you've met or within the situation, or even like these people sometimes can spend a lot of time single. They really can, because it's like they still feel that there is this ideal for them out there somewhere, that there's this like ideal person. And it's like, does this actually exist? This is the question to ask yourselves, is really what that is for everyone to ask themselves. It's like, does this person actually exist? Because it's like, if everyone could have their ideal person or their ideal relationship, you would make that person, you know what I mean? Like, you're never gonna find everything that you're looking for within one person. So it's like, the question is, where does this stem from? Why is it such a huge thing? And like connecting all of this back to since the events of 2020 have transpired, it's like, I feel like the collective went through a collective trauma. And it's like, when there's so much uncertainty in the world, people want to latch onto something that is going to give them certainty. And then sometimes that is a romantic obsession, or just like a person, or this ideal, or the savior even. Sometimes, I've actually heard this before, I don't know from where, but I have heard before that like children who have these idealized situations, or like idealized romantic situations, or like we're waiting for someone to come save them, come from like a tumultuous upbringing, or just like a lot of trauma within the home, or a lot of instability within the home. So it's really, really interesting to see, because this is a theme, this is a trend. Maybe it's a theme because it's like now on the internet more people can talk. Maybe it was always a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe because now it's like more exposed and more out there, we're seeing it more, so maybe it seems like it's more of a pattern right now within the collective. But this is the whole thing. Like, romantic obsession is ultimately you're trying to put this idealized version on a person. And it's like, you're never gonna get that 100% ideal out of one single person. I don't think that's realistic, personally. It's very Neptunian. It's very much, again, going into the Neptune aspect of things. And you'll see this because it's like, let's say people who have Venus Neptune aspects in their charts, or any actually of these placements, like these Neptunian aspects, a lot of the time they might be disappointed in their relationships, and they might be disappointed in the partner, but actually ultimately it was self-deception. If we're gonna be realistic, like, it's ultimately self-deception at the end of the day. So that's sometimes what Neptune does. I'm not trying to put it on an external force and say that it's not up to the person and that it's just like the astrological placement that does this. The astrological aspect of things is basically a leeway for us having this conversation, is really what that is. Just like romantic obsession, why is it a theme? Why is it even a thing to begin with? Like, why should anyone have that much pressure in a relationship at all to be this ideal, and so on and so forth? So it's interesting to see. It really, really is interesting to see. But like I mentioned, ultimately I do feel like people are seeking for love. And ultimately, I do feel like you will only find that within yourself, and then you'll have healthy relationships, because it'll be more relaxed in a way. It'll be less expectations. It'll be less pressure maybe on the relationship or on the person. I do feel like a lot of these things are like ego things that are being broken through within the collective currently. So with all that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video here. I do hope you guys enjoyed my video on romantic obsession and is it a trauma response. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day.